Food Technology 1, FOT 150S. My name is Vusim Shaisa, and today we are going to talk about the chapter on fruits and vegetable technology, focusing on post-harvest practices. In Food Technology 1, we are advancing food and technology, advancing innovation, and making things easier for you. So let's get to it. Right. So in this chapter, we have already spoke about the fruits and vegetables. So we looked at the characteristics in terms of their composition. We also briefly touched about the factors that affect the composition, the gross composition of fruits and vegetables. So where we talked about the weather conditions, where we talked about the soil and the climate and all those things. And then we also looked at the structural properties that are affecting texture, or the factors that affect texture. So we did talk about the hemicellulose, the lignin, and we also talked about the starch and the pectin. And then we further went to talk about and discuss the color pigments that can be found in fruits and vegetables, right? So now we are going to talk about the post-harvest practices. So if you have a picture in your mind, so this is what happens when the fruit or the vegetable is ready or is ripe before it goes to the market. So what are the things that needs to be taken into consideration, or what is it that we need to know? So if now we've got fruits and vegetables, then we have what we call post-harvest practices. So in terms of fruits and vegetables, when we look at post-harvest practices, normally cooling of harvested vegetables in the field is a common practice, right? So fresh produce is often transported in liquid nitrogen, which is cooled to reduce the heat that can be generated. Remember, we did say that fruits and vegetables, they are still undergoing respiration. So cooling to eliminate heat plays an important role. So that is why they need to be transported in liquid nitrogen or cooled trucks to the processing plant, or sometimes they are transported directly to the market. That's if they are going to be sold as whole fruits without further processing. So if they are going to processing plant, at the processing plant, vegetables are cleaned, they are also graded, they are peeled, they are cut, and so on and so forth. So some equipment is used for these purposes, right? But in some cases, then the hand labor is still common, where they are handling the fruits and vegetables. So the choice of washing equipment and other equipment used in processing fruits and vegetables depends on a number of factors, right? So what are these factors? Think about it. What would influence the choice of method that you would choose for fruits and vegetables? Just take a moment to think about it. Yes, you are correct. It is the size of the fruits and vegetables. It is the shape of the fruit and vegetable, and also the fragility of that particular kind of fruits and vegetables, right? So those are things that will influence the choice of equipment that you use. So the first step that happens when we get into the factory with fruits and vegetables, it is the washing step. And why do we have to wash fruits and vegetables? It is because we want to remove the soil or the field soil that can be there. And from your understanding in microbiology, you already know by now that microorganisms are everywhere. And there are also microorganisms that can be found in soil. And some of those microorganisms can be pathogenic in nature, right? So what we then need to do is to remove those microorganisms from the surface of the fruits and vegetables. We also want to remove fungicides, insecticides, and pesticides that can be found potentially on the surface of fruits and vegetables. So these are things that sometimes are used by the farmers in order to protect the fruits and vegetables from insecticides or insects. So they use insecticides, or pests, they use pesticides, or fungi, they used fungicides, right? So in South Africa and in the world in general, there are strict laws that governs the levels of these residues. So what do we mean here? We mean that sometimes washing does not remove all the insecticides that are used, but then they should be within the minimum or lowest level that remain in the surface of the fruit or your vegetable. So now that we know what are the reasons for washing fruits and vegetables, so the question arises is that what are the equipment that we can use to achieve this objective? And for example, in the assessment, you can get a scenario where, for example, or even in life in general, when you're a qualified scientist, there is a client which maybe aims to produce fresh, ready to eat salads and desserts, right? So they approach you to advise them on the choice of washing equipment the factory should use for washing produce to prior to processing. So when you as a food scientist, you must know what are the things that we need to consider, what aspects of equipment you would consider, and also what aspects of fruits and vegetables you'd consider. So it's important for you to understand where does this section fits into the bigger scheme of things. So what is the washing equipment that we normally find in the food industry? So we've got a number of washing equipment. So we've got, like, for example, things like flotation washers. We also have things like rotatory washers, and we also have things like belt washers. So I want to explain these a little bit in depth in the next slide, but normally the flotation cleaner is used for peas, and then the rotatory washer is used mostly for vegetables, but is not suitable for fragile vegetables, and the belt washer is used for vegetables such as asparagus. But let's look at these equipments in detail. How do they look like? So this is the flotation, and the principle of flotation, it applies the principle of buoyancy, right? So buoyancy, remember, in physics, there was the guy who was taking a shower, and not really a shower, but a bath. And what he realized is that he could, when he was putting water in the bath, and he just went in there to take a bath, and then the water, he started to float, right? And then he discovered the principle of buoyancy, and then he went out of the house undressed, and then he started shouting, "Eureka, Eureka, Eureka, I found it, I found it, I found it." So it is the guy that discovered the principle of buoyancy. So the principle of buoyancy uses what we call the density of the material. So we know that materials or matter can have different densities. So this principle of flotation employs the buoyancy differences between food unit. So the food unit would be your fruit or your vegetables, and the contaminants. So what would be the contaminants in this case? In this case, the contaminants would be stones, will be soil, will be rotten fruit, etc. Right? So, for instance, the sound fruit that is good, that is of good quality, that is having good properties, it normally floats when you put it in water, while the contaminated soil or even fruits that are damaged, they will sink, right, in water. So here it is important to use the principle of fluming, so using different units of these flotation washers, right? So we install what we call weighers, which give a very effective cleaning of the fruit, especially peas and beans. However, a disadvantage of this principle, of this type of cleaning, is that it uses a high water. So the water use is very high, and we know that water has become a scarce skills. We've seen in the recent past in Cape Town, remember when we were experiencing day zero. So that is the disadvantage of using such a method. So what we then need to do is to think about how we can then recycle the water that is used in this kind of cleaning. But here the principle of flotation uses the buoyancy, but it does not apply to all fruits and vegetables, right? They select fruit and vegetables, as I've alluded now, that we can use it for peas and beans and some of the fruits. And here we also have a principle of water spray cleaning, which is a spray belt washer. So but basically what happens here you've got rotating rollers. They are rotating this side, which is anti-clockwise, and then the fruit is rotating on the clockwise, right? And here on top there are sprays, water sprays, and then this would be the fruit pieces. And this roller is going on that direction, and then the fruit will go on the other direction. So what happens here is that the spray washing is very widely used in the food industry, and it's also used for many types of food raw materials. So the efficiency of this method depends on the volume and temperature of the water and the time of exposure. So here you can also use water that is a little bit warm instead of cold water. Remember that warm water is more efficient than cold water in removing microorganisms. As a general rule, so the small volumes of high pressure water gives the most efficient dirt removal, but this is limited by product damage, because you also don't want to damage your product at the same time that you are washing it. So this is used especially for things like apples, things like oranges. You can also use this kind of machine. So with larger pieces of material, it may be necessary to rotate the unit so that the whole surface is presented. So that is what we make this point. So you can rotate this unit so that you can be able to have the exposure to the whole fruit or raw material. So here we also have what we call the spray cleaning, which here we are using the drum washer. So the drum washer, it is the drums that rotates here. So the dirty material will come on this side, and here there are sprays on the inside. As the drum rotates, the material is being exposed, right? Right round, and the cleaned material comes out here. So in some cases it can be that this belt or this drum is lifted on the other side so that there can be a flow of material on a nice side. So these are the types of, I mean, basically, these are basic washing equipment that you'd find. We'll still go in depth with regards to cleaning raw materials when we go to the chapter on cleaning of raw materials. But here we just want to to highlight in terms of the post-harvest practices. And then once your fruits and vegetables is cleaned, there are 6 methods that you can use. The first one, you can use lye peeling. You can also use hot water scalding. You can use steam under pressure. You can use abrasion peeling, direct flame, and mechanical peelers. So here now you want to remove the skin out of the raw materials, right? And here what we also need to understand is that each raw material has its own unique characteristics. So you must look at the characteristics of the raw material before you can then decide which peeling method you are going to use. For example, if we want to peel the skin from guavas, we may decide to use lye peeling, which is the application of 1% sodium hydroxide in hot water at 93 degrees Celsius. In fact, we used to do a practical where we are peeling canned guavas, and we were in the pilot plant, and we were using the lye peeling method. The hot water scalding, I have made an example of this, where you just put in hot water into your tomatoes to remove the skins. And then you can also use to crack the skins of the tough skins in some of the fruits and vegetables. You can use the steam under pressure. And I think, for example, if you use this thing squash, Gem squash, normally it's very hard, and then sometimes you boil it and then it develops this pressure, and then afterwards you are able to cut the gem squash and consume it. So that is basically using the steam under pressure. So we also have things like abrasion peeling. So abrasion peeling is one of the methods that we use here for the peeling of the skin of the potatoes. So this material, this equipment uses what we call carborundum, which is an abrasive material made from silicone and carbon. So here you start off with dirty potatoes, and as the potatoes they rotate over these various compartments, the skin gets removed. So this also cuts in terms of the peeling time. So imagine in a large scale setting, you wouldn't really be able to have people who are peeling potatoes by hand, right? So peeling of fruits and vegetables is frequently associated or carried out in association with cleaning, right? So mechanical peeling methods such as the abrasion method requires loosening of the skin using the principles as described here. So I also want to show you how we can then use we can peel using a flame, a direct flame, especially for onions. And then also will you see the mechanical peelers for apples. Let's look at this illustration here. So here, what we can then see is that the skin of the onions is removed by flame. So basically, you burn in the skin, and then there is a flame that removes the skin, and then afterwards you'll have like those cleaned onions, and after this they will go for a washing step, and then once they are washed, then you have these onions that are peeled so they don't have the skin. So this is one of the techniques that can be used in as so far as onions are concerned. So it will not be desirable for you to use this principle for apples. It is not going to work, or for oranges, right? So this is only applicable for this technique. And then we also right. So what we saw there is also kind of like a mechanical peeling apples. So it can also be done at a small scale and also at a larger scale. So here, I also want to highlight some of the post-harvest practices so that we can use is, for example, trimming and also cutting. So some of the vegetables require cutting, stemming, pitting, or coring. So for example, asparagus, they need to be cut to specific lengths, and olives, they need to be pitted, and apples needs to be cored, and blemishes can also be removed by hand trimming using a knife. So these are some of the post-harvest practices that we then need to take into consideration when we deal with fruits and vegetables. And then the next thing is you can then so once you have dealt with the soil, the microbiological aspects, the contaminants that can exist there, the next step is that you need to deal with the enzymes that could be inherently present. And I've explained in the previous slide, in the previous class about blanching. So we've discussed this in detail. And of course, our practical will be on blanching. So these are the post-harvest practices that we need to take into consideration. So I will also do another short video just basically to introduce you to some of the aspects. Thank you.